Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is your favorite dark sorcerer here, Angelus, son of Abaddon. And today, I would have preferred to be on sooner, but unfortunately, it took almost 5 hours for me to update my computer. This damn thing took forever. So, good news is I'm finally back online. So, anyways, today, I've been getting lately a lot of questions about sources on necromancy, the practices, the experiments. What sources do you recommend to people who want to go down this road? Well, first of all, to go down this road is not for everyone. I have to say that because of the fact that this particular path working, this root working of necromancy goes back hundreds of years from the African Agi to the Swedish Hexa, the Strega in Italian, goes into Scandinavian, Slavic, Greek, Roman, Egyptian, even Tibetan. Necromancy is the first of the 7 forbidden arts and practices condemned by the Catholic Church. And there's a reason for that, and that is because it is a very potent system. It is a system of utilizing the spirits, calling upon them, utilizing their knowledge and their wisdom to benefit the practitioner. If you think Satanism is hardcore, necromancy outdoes Satanism. It really does. There is a lot that goes along with this practice. And when I did my initial videos on both the Dark Sorcery channel and my own here, I pointed out the fact that there were 4 main indicators of witchcraft in general. Okay, 5 different practices. There were, or 4 different practices rather. There was witchcraft, calling on the elements; necromancy, which was calling on the spirits; divination, which is summoning the spirits through multiple different sources; and then there's possession. Okay, I even spoke to the terms of medical aspects of this practice because medical techniques are utilized within necromancy, especially over the last 300 to 400 years, going back to roughly about the 16th century. Okay, when more archaic techniques were employed for revival of the spirit, the revival of the body, the corpse. And Greek and, or not Greek, but German and Russian, you have the terms Gleek or leech. The term necro, meaning dead, mancy, meaning the art of. Okay, but unlike the Greek, you go into the Latin and you see the Latin definition: nigromancy. Negro meaning black magic, the practice of black magic. Okay, this is why it was called nigromancy. Now, in 2 different instances, from say 500 years ago to 1,000 years ago, you have 2 different spellings of nigromancy. You have number one spelling has a Y, as in NY, okay? G. Necromancy. Whereas the other one, the more commonly understood one from 1,000 years ago, was the Nigromancy with an I. Okay? But every region of the world is different. For an example, we know that necromancy is a Greek definition, okay, for working with the dead. However, there's a much ancient, much more archaic definition known as Nikia. Nikia was both a spiritual and a physical practice. Okay. Now, I'm not going to get into these definitions on a full basis here because it has nothing to do with the material that I'm going to be putting forth for you to answer some of your questions. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a backdrop. Okay. Now, like I said, different regions of the world have a different perspective. For an example, the Egyptian Book of the Dead compared to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Okay? Two different books. One relating life following death and death following life. Basically, the balance factor, if you follow the Korean flag symbol of yin and yang. For one to exist, the other two has to exist. Whereas the Egyptian Book of the Dead is more about working with corpses for divination. It's more used for spiritual conjuration, bringing the dead back to life, medical and scientific proof, alchemical proof of mysticism, the mage and the sage of occultism, for example. Now, some very good sources, and I'm going to get into some of these. Now, this is the first book is a guy that I find arrogant, self-absorbed, and I'm not a big fan of him. He's very childish. But the one book that he did put out was very well referenced. It was very well written. And that was The Witch's Book of the Dead by Christian Day. Okay? I may not like the guy personally, especially after recent events, but he does speak on a lot of different aspects of necromancy, including oneomancy, which is dream magic, dreaming the dead, working with the dead, necromantic magic, the history, okay, divination rituals, the whole kin caboodle. And in the appendixes, he literally gives some oils and oleums for you to use, okay. Now, I thought this book was very, very thought out. It was very, very instrumental within my research into necromancy rituals. It was one of the many that I got into. Now, when you type in necromancy, you can also come up with Richard Cavendish. Okay? Richard Cavendish's book, The Black Arts, has 3 volumes to it. I actually have all 3. Different writing styles in each, but the words for the words are the same. And necromancy is definitely one of these type of practices. For an example, I'm going to just flip through here real fast, get to the ends. And necromancy has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 mentions just in this book alone. And one of the things that it does bring up is astrological symbols. It brings up occultism such as Hermetic and that of the Kabbalah. Okay. And one of the most famous names of occultism today is is heavily influenced in this book. It is well written, and some of the stories match up. And it goes into the full story, which is in the Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic, a new translation by Elvis Levi. Okay. His personal encounter with black magic and necromancy scared him so bad, he went back to the Kabbalah. He went back to Hermetism. Okay. His book is This book here tells his entire story with his how he went to London, how he got into this circle that he was trying to get in touch with, and he was tapped on the shoulder by one individual, a woman, a hexa. Okay, hexa means witchcraft, means witch. It goes into witchcraft, and like I said at the beginning, this is a Swedish definition. Okay, goes back much farther than the wizard, goes way back further than the definition of warlock, witch, mage, and sage, and such. It goes back into the old world. Okay, I'm talking ancient Gaelic. I'm talking ancient Scandinavian. Okay, very old words, very different era, definitely a whole different eon compared to that of Eliphas Levi's. Okay, but he performed the rite, and it scared him so bad that he literally left and went home and did not actually join that coven. Okay, and he put out his own works through Hermetism. Okay, now one of the best sources of blood sorcery and how it applies to necromancy. If you are acquainted with the Witch of Endor, which seems to be just about everybody that has written a book, basically the Witch of Endor, in my opinion, is regurgitated material, but she is referenced in multiple different arenas, okay, of religious study, not just the JCI, but also witchcraft in general, paganism, Wiccan practices. Okay, okay. Now, but like I said, this particular individual comes at it from a medical perspective, but also a scientific perspective. And I really liked her books, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Okay. And this is why. Not only does she come at it from a doctor's perspective, but or a blood sorceress perspective. But she literally gives at least 20 to 30 pages of medical techniques on how to utilize necromantic practices and blood sorcery practices to strengthen one's own body. She goes into a little bit of her practices, her perspectives on causing death, being around death, and being rejuvenated. This, I can tell you, is actually true because of the fact that when I worked for Tractor Supply, one of my jobs was to dispose of unwanted pests, specifically that of rodents, who kept getting into the feed. We had mouse traps, we had poisons put out for these animals to get to, and then we had to toss them in the dumpster for removal. For some reason, when I got around death, I was rejuvenated. I had so much energy. So that part is actually true. Okay, it's not just that of the Da'ath energy, the death essences. Okay, but it was something that really she literally goes into the heightened sensory abilities. She goes into basically the ESP type techniques. She goes into freezing the blood, utilizing it through magnetics, even. She goes into spiritualism, such as demonolatry, sleeping amongst the dead, taking inventory of these things to, say, harvesting the elixir, collecting and preserving the elixir and biologicals. Okay, so like I said, when I tell you that she's coming at it from a medical perspective, this is actually the book that got me put on the track of looking at the medical aspects of necromancy. And I found and literally traced it all the way back to the 16th century. So this book really plays a huge and instrumental part in necromancy. And it's called Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 1. And I recommend that you also get Volume 2 um, because of this fact. And it's by Sorceress Cagliostro, the Necromancer. Okay? I do and highly recommend it. And when I got into the Mazajira Cabal system and started reading Charnel Whispers by Sumnus Dreadwood, I went out and I started studying the world's mythologies, trying to find these deitas, these spiritual beings, these entities that were mentioned not only in Profane Seals, but also a few other of these books, like Chanel Whispers, which is a book based off necromancy, that of the Black Scriptures and the Rites of the 13 Tongues, getting into the Left-Hand Path, and then finally getting into Profane Seals. Now, what's ironic about this work is that it took me into the old European countries, such as Slavic, okay, getting into Proto-German, getting into Irish and Scottish traditions, European, um, getting into Baltic even, okay, but mostly into Russian witchcraft, and it's kept me there for over 6 months. I'm not kidding on this one. It literally has kept me in this area of Slavic and Russian area between Russia and German for the last 6 to 8 months. I kid you not. It's been insane. Every time I found a deity, it has led me right back into these regions. And now I know why. Because of the fact that Natasha Helvin, okay, and I did quote the author of this book wrong to a individual on Messenger, so I do apologize to that individual. Um, this individual, her form of witchcraft, the Russian form of witchcraft, has literally been traced all the way back to the 8th century. Okay, and I'm pretty sure it goes way back before that, especially through my own personal research. This book was well written, including the black magic aspect of it. Her volume 2, I guess you could say, was very, very well written. The rituals and techniques within it was very, very good, thought out. And she really put me back in touch with voodoo as well. And I'll get into that in just a moment. But finding out that Slavic and Russian witchcraft not only had ties to the JCI, the Judo-Christian institutions, but also to that of Voodoo, which is an African Caribbean tradition that has gone all the way down into South, Central, and North America. So it's one of those practices that's highly adaptable, but also very, very in depth with ancestral lineage. So, like I said, to find out these things and to tie them in with seals and sigilliums and the actual practices within these regions. I didn't even know Voodoo was practiced in Russian until I got into this. So this book is known as Slavic Witchcraft, and it's by Natasha Helvin. Okay, both her books are very, very good. She comes at it from a very good practitioner. She comes from a hereditary lineage of witchcraft practitioners. That's, for those of you who are new, that means beginner. Okay, that means from a beginner's perspective, a hereditary family lineage is a family line of witches. Think of the Strega, who passes down their lineage to their daughters. Okay, but in this case, it's a family. It doesn't just go to women, it goes into men. Now, one thing I've learned about the Hexa is that most of the views of witches that were reported were female, but there were also men that were also practiced as well. Today, we have a lot more men and women practicing, obviously, but I just wanted to put that out there. I do recommend her books to you because you will learn a lot in that capacity. Another great source comes from the 13th century, okay? Roughly about the 11th to the 13th century, and it's known as the Munich manuscripts. Okay, later around the 15th century became known as Forbidden Rites, a necromancer's manual of the 15th century put out by Richard Keffer. Okay, and it looks like this. Okay, this book is based off grimoire traditions. Okay, now grimoire traditions have a lot of necromancy in it, from spirits like angels or demonic activity. Okay, and I really found it very interesting and influencing because of the experiments that took place during this time period that this was being constructed. It's not just telling you to go, oh, contact this individual and this is how you do it in the name of God with a rod of power. No. In this case, you are actually learning how to do one of these rituals from an illusionist perspective of creating, say, for an example, let's say an army appearing out of nowhere, or a castle or a feast. These are feats that have been referenced throughout history of paganism and Wiccan practices, black magic even. So I mean, the Richard Kepkever really did an awesome job in this book because of the fact that he stayed true to the grimoire systems when he was going down through it and pulling all the experiments, pulling all the references to them, and later in the book bringing in demonology and angelology. So that was something that was very good, and I do recommend that book to you. This is one of, I want to say, 4 books. They were roughly around $40 a piece off Amazon. Trust me, it's worth the money. Very good books. And last year, I was when I was tapped on the shoulder by a friend of mine, a brother, and this individual lives. I'm not. He actually came to me. He was associated with Bog when I first came across him, and I sent him a friend request. It was a year later that all of a sudden he just messaged me out of the blue, accepted my friend request, and then asked me to write a essay for his upcoming book. Okay. Now, I actually have this book right here. And this book is called Sabbatica, The Oracles of the Dead. And I'm looking forward to purchasing the others books on this as well by him, because he did an awesome job in this book. He not only brought together a lot of good practitioners of necromancy and the black arts, black magic, and so forth, but in this case, Sabbatica was one of the best books I've ever read. S. Connolly was even one of the authors in here. Out of all the names in this book, outside of myself, Ball Cadman, let's see, S. Connolly. Those are the only other 2 names that I was familiar with when I got this book. When I read down through every essay in this book, it brought new perspectives to my own personal practice in necromancy. Things that were referenced, like the Aztecs, or that of, say, for example, numerology, astrology, astronomy, getting into the planetary alignments, the zodiacs, going down into shamanism and the black shaman, getting into medicine men, getting into that of Incan practices, okay, Mexican and Central American practices. You know, this book has so much information just on necromancy from personal experiences. Mine was more historical, referencing on how it was viewed, where it was viewed, and everything like that. But all these other authors came forth with their own personal practice. And I thought that was pretty cool because one of the essays, one that I actually started reading again, by the way, is actually coming into an upcoming book. I don't know if the book's out yet or not, but he said this was from his upcoming book, and it was like, that's cool. But to see some of these practitioners who I've been familiar with, I mean, I have most of S. Connolly research, S. Connolly's books. I have about 9 books currently from Bog, and I've got another one on the way. So, but when you come to necromancy, there is a book called, what is it? Conjuring Spirits. Now, if you really want a context from a philosophical perspective, that is a book that I would recommend to you. Now, it doesn't have much to do with necromantic practices outside of chiromancy, but it does come at you from a couple of the well-known grimoires, such as the Clavicle of Solomon, the Constitution of Pope Honorius, for an example, the grimoire, the Sacred Magic of Abraham Malin the Mage, or the grimoire, the Black Raven, stuff like that. The grimoire of Armadale, even. So you are going to be coming up against references where it has books and stuff like that. But like I said, one of the books I was very hesitant on for the last couple of years of getting was a book on necromantic sorcery. Because of the fact that I've heard numerous stories about this individual, one of which that it drove him mad to the point of insanity. Another story is that he looked at one of his mentors and told him not to contact him anymore because he had gone Christian. Now, like I said, these are just stories to me. I've heard a lot over the last couple of years since this book came out. So I have been hesitant on reading it. And I finally got the money together to get the complete works by E.A. Quetting. And while I did that, I still had some extra money to go. And I ended up getting this book as well. And it's called Necromantic Sorcery, The Forbidden Rites of Death Magic by Dante Abiel. Okay. Now, both of those books, a total of 9 books total, 8 in one, and this book here came to about 118 bucks, about 118 to 125 area. Not bad. Well worth it, though. As I read down through necromantic sorcery, at first I thought it was more of a storytelling, much like that of, say, the Kingdom of Flames. But the more I got into these books, like, by the time you get, for an example, by the time you get into, say, for an example, the Works of Darkness, which is the second book in the complete works, it goes from in my opinion, a child's perspective into a professional, dedicated sorcerers. Okay, that fast between those 2 books. Okay, and then you go into the rest of them, and it really paints a picture of what black magic is and how sorcery really is. The same way with necromantic sorcery. It starts off like a mentorship, and it tells about his personal journey and almost something out of mythology or folklore even. something that takes place out of, say, Hollywood produced films. But as you get into it, okay, for example, I'm actually rereading it right now for the fourth time, and I'm on page 52. Okay, and this is, I want to say, chapter 3. Okay, chapter 3 that I'm on right now in this. And like I said, this is my fourth time through this book, and I'm gaining more of an insight. And when you think of spiritualism and you think of contacting the spirits, especially underneath the current workings that I'm working through in my own personal practices, I've been noticing a lot of things, heightened senses. Like I've got headphones in and I've got music blasting and I got this sensation that somebody's following me like the day before yesterday. So, and then I realize at the same time, I don't only got two shadows walking beside me, but also my scepter, one to my side and one diagonal. Freaking spectacular. So you know you got the spiritual going there too, which means that was a spiritual intervention, not letting me know, hey, you are being followed. And it was actually true because the guy really was not being, let's just say, as stealthy as I think he wanted to be. I can tell you exactly what he was wearing. You know, I can tell you what he was wearing. I mean, the guy was wearing freaking flip flops for crying out loud. You know, those things are not the stealthiest shoes that you want to have on. So, I mean, when you get into this stuff and you get further into spiritualism, you start doing the fastings, you start doing the summonings, the petitionings, and all that stuff, and you really get in touch with spiritual leaders, those who are more experienced in this field than you, and they start recommending other materials to you. They start bringing you into more alignment. Like I'm currently working on two papers between more like three papers really, because I'm actually doing papers on Roman and Greek and then Egyptian necromancy. There's a lot of information there, and he didn't say. I wasn't told how many pages to go, so knowing me, I'm probably going to be following it directly to the end and exhausting the material that I have and got my hands on. So like I said, there's so much information out there on necromancy and not just Google. Google is a great source for you to get into. I mean, type in different aspects like blood sorcery and necromancy, or just plain blood sorcery and how it was viewed. You know, get into necromancy. Type in rejuvenation of a corpse, and you're going to find references to medical, you know, terminology and methods of reanimating corpses. You're going to find medical practices. You're going to find ancient, archaic techniques on how to bring forth a corpse or a spirit. You're going to find different, um, more modern day sci-fi type things like the world of what is it called? The world of witchcraft or the world of warcraft or something like that. You're going to find references to D&D, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, but you're going to also find references that are actually well worth your time that are put forth by real practitioners. And by real practitioners, I'm talking about those who actually practice and put the materials forth. So you're really going to see a lot of this stuff. All right. So really delve into it. So with that said, I hope you delve into these. I hope they're educational. I hope you go out and, like I said, and get them. Hope it's been educational. All right. And like I said, these works have really benefited my own personal practice that I've been into. So really get into that. All right. Have a good one.